Yeah. Okay, so we're still a minute away from 2, so maybe that's why the attendees aren't coming in. Right, it's 2 o'clock. I'm going to press go. Are you ready? Are you steady? You're muted now, I think, Jess.
Yeah, I'll stay muted until you're ready to start.
Okay, I'll keep an eye here on just attendees as well. Yeah, so we've one person who's joined. Good afternoon to the first person joining. So it is 2 o'clock, but we're going to give it maybe, Jess, if we give it like maybe 3 minutes, 3 minutes past 2, we'll just let a few people join up and then we'll start. And then when we start, there'll be no stopping. So
yeah.
I'll turn off my video till so people aren't looking at my head for a while. And we can, at about 3 minutes past 2, we might start.
Yeah.
So Jess, I'm just trying to load up my presentation as well here, so making sure that you can see it and it's on full screen before I'll just swap it around there. Now, can you see that, Jess?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We just had a question.
Yeah, so the question was, hello, just testing the question answers are working for later on. Audra, yeah, absolutely. The questions answers are working. So we're receiving it loud and clear. Did you see that one coming through, Jess?
I did, yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
If you're ready, Tommy, do you think we should look at?
Yeah, we can start. Yeah, people will be joining just as we go along, so I can see people joining there as we speak. Yeah. So far away.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. So I just wanted to say that we're really excited to be working with Tommy and Precision Microbes here at Wynnstay. It's a really exciting product that Tommy's going to tell you lots more about. So if there's any questions, just pop them in the chat box. We'll get to them at the end. And if there's anything else in the meantime, we've got a few housekeeping bits at the end. We'll send up a follow-up email that'll include details of how to get the product or try it if it's something that you're interested in for your clients. Yeah, and with that, Tommy, I'd like you to take the floor and fire away.
Thank you so much, Jess, and thanks to all the team at Wynnstay. It's a real privilege to be working with you, and it's been really interesting. And I think it's been an exciting couple of months as we've seen the feedback start to come back from UK dairy farms on the product. So just if anything goes wrong, Jess, and people can't hear me or something happens, my slides aren't moving, you might let me know. You know, we're gone past the old these webinars. We're back to in-person meetings, and it's, you know, technology from time to time can leave us down. So yeah, I'm going to talk about precision microbes, but I can't talk about calves without talking about some of the fundamentals. Even though I'm very excited about these particular products, I still think that they're tools, and I suppose I do want to cover some of the things I've learned about calves over the last couple of years as a vet. I'm a vet based in Ireland. I'm a veterinary consultant, which I self-christened myself that, so it's not as fancy as it sounds. But I was in veterinary practice for 16 years. I ran a practice for 12 of those years, and I've done lots of things, particularly on the farm animal side of it. I would have a real passion for calves. I left practice in 2017, done various things like an Nuffield farming scholarship, worked in farming media, did lots of things. But over the last 2.5 years, I've been working with microbes. And I have to say, by far, the microbial world has been the most exciting project I've got to work with as a vet so far. So I'm incredibly biased with my excitement, but I think it is. And hopefully I'll set a little bit of a scene about why, from a timing perspective as well, it's a really interesting area. So I'm going to kind of cover the microbiome and health, but I'm going to start with calf health. So we have a full range of different blends across species. And you know, from a pretty recent start here in the Irish market, we're an Irish company, we've had considerable success. I'm going to cover today, I suppose, back to the basics of the calf rearing, the system, the fundamentals. I'm a vet who happens to be very interested in psychology and behavior, so I'll throw some ideas out there as well around what I've learned in that space in calf health. You know, it's a very simple message. But after years of traveling and researching, calf health is about doing the simple things well, attention to detail and consistency. And I'm hopefully going to cover why I think Precision Microbes is a game changer in this space. So I think, like a lot of vets and people working with calves, I started very much in the disease and the routines when I qualified first. I was just happy to get that vein probably for the first couple of months. But as I got better as a vet, I got increasingly interested in the factors that drive calf health, be it feeding and nutrition and the environment that the calves are in. I suppose that's been an evolution over the years. And I now think that the biggest driver of calf health is people, particularly the farmers and people working with the calves. So when I look at calf health, I have two approaches. I really focus on the people side of it to get an understanding of where the farm, the system is. You know, our farms are getting bigger, where everyone fits in. And then I look at the second pillar is the whole calf health piece. I won't dwell too long on it, but I think it's an area maybe not very typical for a vet to be interested in, but I look at people performance and I think it's really interesting and how we move the dial. And I've done that since I've been in practice. It's something I did in the latter years of as a veterinary practitioner, to moving outside of that sphere to being involved with training farmers and training vets around calf health and other areas. And, you know, I've seen the power of goals, you know, the idea of the outcomes and goals that we want to achieve, the ideas maybe we have. And again, as advisors, vets and specialists, nutritionists, we're providing skills, resources needed to help achieve these outcomes. And a lot of times when I look at calf health, I focus a lot on habits and behaviors, the processes within the system that will help achieve these outcomes and goals. I hope that makes sense. But action ultimately is the real important bit. So when I look at the calf side of it, I was very lucky to do an Nuffield farming scholarship in 2018, where I traveled to 14 countries globally, and I came up with this concept of optimizing biology and behavior. So it's in very simple terms, what it was, it was really about understanding what, you know, the calf, the cow wants within the farm system, and how do we optimize this to get a better outcome for the calf, profitable for the farmer, and why potentially that's good for the consumer of the future. So ultimately, by looking after the calf, it's good for farmer, consumer and industry. So I'm a big fan, I suppose, I'm a cow signals trainer as well, as like the basic understanding of biology and behavior. And when I go onto a farm, and I don't do it as much as I used to, but I do occasionally. I was on farm yesterday with vets. I'm always looking for this when I talk about this type of approach. And this is nothing revolutionary, I admit, but I'm looking for stress gaps. So if we understand the biological needs and behaviors of the calf, how much milk they'll drink, critical temperatures, etc., and we look at what's actually happening, there are stress gaps. And those stress gaps are right throughout the system. And I'll talk about the systematic approach. And in fairness, we'd all love to be in the success category, but most farms and most people, we're all living with stress gaps. We're in the middle somewhere. So for me, it's really about how do we move the dial forward when it comes to calf health. Again, it's really, I suppose, I'm in a seasonal system here in Ireland, and that's where I've cut my teeth in calf health, and it's very applicable. But I've really noticed that calf health is about compound interest, and I'll explain that in a little bit, and doing simple things well over time, which isn't that simple, and really applying good habits and systems. And as a vet, one area that I saw that in my own career in practice was when I went from my Jeep being totally disorganized in the middle of a busy spring with boxes of stuff everywhere to getting shelves and organizing my medicines and my equipment. I saved time, I reduced stress because I systemized how I was working. So I kind of look at calf health the same way. Again, I look at calf health, and these are probably way too simplistic for the audience, but bear with me. I look at calf health like links in a chain. We know that it starts with the cow before she calves. We look at dry cow nutrition, and there's all these little links, some more important than others. And what we're really looking for when I go on to see calf health issues, I'm looking for weak links in the chain. And the nature of farming is that some of those links are beyond our control, and some of them, there's always going to be ones there. But, you know, if they're big ones, and these are basically bottlenecks, if it's colostrum is a problem, well, then the knock-on effect is huge in that system. I've really applied a 1% rule. So small changes over time will seldom achieve perfection, but we will always aim for progress. So when I look at these bottlenecks again and these stress gaps, there's lots of potential examples there, particularly when we see more and more automated feeding here with our calf systems. Hygiene with colostrum and milk is one that I consistently see as a big challenge, and it can be the basics around calf space and everything like that. So again, as a practitioner, what I was discovering was that calf health was multifactorial. How could I go out and actually look and learn and get better, and actually look at all the elements when I did a visit? So I came up with a very simple way of doing it. I came up with a checklist to identify and give me a system to follow so I wouldn't miss things. So why do I use checklists on farms, a systems approach? Because I was missing things. I saw this on YouTube this morning, and I put it in here into my slide, but what was I missing? So if you're looking at here, just to keep people's attention again, I'd ask people to have a look at these 4 lines and see how many F's you see. Okay, so there's a little quiz. I'll give you the answer next. I got it completely wrong this morning when I was on YouTube. So how many F's can you read here? And as you read those 4 sentences, I suppose it was the idea of checklist was that calf health is multifactorial, and I wanted to make sure that I was missing or not missing any links in those chains. And that's why my checklist approach worked well. I've used it to train farmers and vets in different areas. It's a very simple thing, but I have seen that that process has real potential. Now, for those of you who are reading, I better go back because I've taken it out. Those of you who are actually looking and counting how many F's it's there, if you counted 3 like me, you're wrong. There's actually 6 F's here. And this is just maybe a poor analogy, but it's an example of what I was doing without my checklist. So if you're reading it again now, there's actually 6 F's here. I was missing stuff. So that's the idea of the checklist. I didn't want to miss things. Again, I've got really into behavior and habits, and again, looking at how that works on farm. Again, particularly hygiene is one of the areas where I think consistently I'm trying to improve on farm and trying to get that cue, the routine, and ultimately the reward for farms who implement better hygiene protocols. So I'm very focused on habits. Okay. So if I look at my non-negotiables in calf health, this is not going to blow anybody away, but I have studied calf health for many years, and I really am passionate about calf health. And I'm always, you know, whether I be traveling outside of Ireland and working, and even with my Nuffield, I was looking for this magic solutions around calf health. But what I saw on top performing farms, and this won't be any surprise, is that these 6 key areas are key: colostrum, feeding, hygiene, fresh air, calf comfort, and space. I hopefully might bring some new thinking in some of these areas, and probably a lot of the stuff that you've heard 100 times before. But ultimately, when I go out onto farm, I'm thinking about, as a vet, infectious disease. And we know that we're trying to balance always the level of immunity versus the level of infection pressure. We're trying to increase immunity, and we're trying to drive down infection pressure. So when I look at that, when I start talking about maybe pathogens and we think about infection pressure, I'm also going to be talking at the second half of this presentation about microbes and precision microbes. When we actually look at commensal or beneficial bacteria as a percentage of the population, they're quite large. So when we actually think about pathogens, they make up about 0.1% of the bacteria. So there's a whole range of other beneficial bacteria and commensals that are in the environments that we may be able to benefit from, that actually have an immunogenic potential as well. Okay, back to my non-negotiable list. So what's new in colostrum and gut health? Again, colostrum is maybe a tired subject. I think with vets and farmers, we think we've heard it all. I know that Alec Back was in the UK as recently as last month, and he probably covered a lot of this, but I think there's some really exciting stuff coming on the colostrum piece across all animal species, actually. And if we look at, particularly from a gut health perspective and an epigenetic perspective, if we think about the agents that are in colostrum that aren't in mature milk, it's really interesting. And I think this is going to be an exciting area of research as we learn more and more, particularly about the gut microbiome that I'll talk about. And I think where this is interesting as well, from a hygiene perspective, if we look at research done by Conor McClune in 2016, where they took a huge number of colostrum samples and 50% of them had higher than normal TBCs, particularly when we look at E. coli and its effect on the gut that I'll talk about in a while, I think this is a really interesting area when we're trying to move calf health forward. Again, when we think about colostrum, we know about the 3 Qs, but colostrum essentially contains prebiotic elements in it as well. It's helping develop the immature calf's gut. You know, there's a lot of talk about epigenetics, which essentially is that, you know, we have our DNA, but we can have positive and negative influences, feeding being a really important one and colostrum being another one. The example that's always used is the queen bee versus the worker bee. And, you know, she feeds, they're born and come out of the pupae the same. She feeds on royal jelly. She lives for 2 years. She's twice the body weight, where the poor worker lasts for 3 to 6 weeks. So feeding in particular and colostrum has a massive impact on gut health, epigenetics, and future performance. Again, if I was looking at colostrum, I won't bore you, but I was on farm again with vets yesterday, and we found a bottleneck on the farm, a large number of robots on the farm, and their colostrum, they were managing it well from the 3 Qs, but the hygiene was poor, particularly where they were harvesting colostrum. There wasn't a routine. And when you actually look and swab these with quite high levels of E. coli, which can be a problem, and it's one thing that I've picked up quite a bit of. Again, the non-negotiables on feeding is I'm constantly trying to push farmers to feed more milk. And this is about optimizing biology. I've seen it time and time again to improve performance. One of the areas as we move to more and more milk replacer is that I have seen that Precision Microbes being fed daily as a gut stabilizer has helped with farms to up the milk level and still have a stable digestive tract. Again, it's about doing the basics around feeding, quality replacers if we're using them, fresh meal, water is a big one, and fiber. But if I look at the farms that are really optimally performing on feeding, it's really simple again, attention to detail and consistency. But if I go back maybe even 6 or 7 years ago, I wasn't looking into detail that I might look now at some very simple things. Again, how to make feeding easy. Again, looking at the routine and hygiene, looking at the habits and behaviors within the farm. What's the people and staffing levels like? What's the capabilities like? And how can we make it easy? And particularly when we see automated feeders as well as been maybe the solution to a reduction of people to feed calves, we need to actually look at these automated feeders and understand some of the risks around them. With poor colostrum, poor feeding and stress in general, I want to just dip into the microbiome for a little bit, because when we look at the gut, and I'll use this diagram quite a bit, when we look at a cellular level in the digestive tract, we have a healthy gut here with nice cell apposition, 2 nice layers of mucin, goblet cells, we've got immune regulation. When we get a disruption acutely or chronically in the gut, well, it can have a big impact. We must understand the impact of stress, and stress can come in the form of dehorning and weather, changes of diet from maybe whole milk to milk replacer. Ultimately, when we look at stress is involved in the hypoadrenal cortical gland, adrenal gland, and production of cortisol. Cortisol ends up in the gut. It's sort of where it's dumped at the end, and has quite a negative impact on the gut microbiome and gut health. So, you know, another part of what we've seen with Precision is because the natural evolution of a calf during its rearing program, is there certain stressors. We are eliminating a lot of the gut health risks around stress there. Okay, another non-negotiable on the calf rearing process is hygiene. And again, I was very obsessed with, what was the perfect disinfectant, what was the perfect detergent for many years. Now I'm very focused on the workable processes and routines within the farm. What's the people power like on the farm? Where are we cleaning equipment, and actually how are we doing it? And it is a huge, huge impact as well by looking at the simple hygiene protocols, starting with hygiene in the calving pens. And good hygiene in calving pens from a calf perspective means we have a cleaner udder. Again, looking at all the equipment, feeding, colostrum, etc. And really looking at simple protocols. I won't have time to tell my story, I'm conscious of time, but I have lots of stories around that. But I think hygiene, again, disinfectants and detergents are important, that we have quality ones, but workable processes are really, really important. Now, in our seasonal system, we see calf housing as a huge bottleneck, and I don't think it's different in the UK from my experience. When we look at fresh air, we talk about air movements, and we look at actually air movements at calf level. And we have to be mindful of temper neutral zone, that the calf can get quite cold below 15 degrees, and also that the calf spends 80% of its day lying down, meaning that the nose is about 6 inches off the ground. We want air movements, 5-6 times in an hour. And, fresh air is actually a cheap and brilliant disinfectant. But keeping calves warm and fresh air can be a real challenge. And it can be a very farm specific challenge. I have gone moving towards more open sheds with calf jackets and higher planes of nutrition, and that's worked really well. But it can be a very much an individual calf thing. Again, if I look at ideal calf housing, I've been involved in designing calf houses, and everyone wants a drawing that they can just replicate. But I like to have conversations about, okay, what's the routines in the farm? What are we trying to achieve here? And, where is shed position? And, the key drivers I'll still push for is space per calf. So our national figure for a pre-weaned calves, 1.5 meters squared is the target. I think that's inadequate. I think we should be aiming for 2 meters squared per calf. I think drainage is overlooked, and ventilation, and it's easy to clean out and work with, and all in-out systems. Again, comfort and all those simple things. I think with the advent as well of automatic feeders, positioning, how we calibrate them, getting drainage around them, simple, but can be big bottlenecks as well. Okay, so I'm nearly to the end of my non-negotiables of calf health, but I think it's important that I'm not selling a solution here, that it's a tool that's going to solve calf problems. We've got to focus on the basics and having them right. The combination of the two is what's really worked well for us here. When we focus on the basics and add in precision microbes, that's a real game changer. Again, calf comfort, this kind of goes back to my cow signals, my Nuffield piece. Particularly when we look at calves being monogastrics and how their metabolism works in the first 3 to 4 weeks, having that dry, warm lie, we can look at nesting scores. Cold is a big one, but obviously in season on all year round calving, heat becomes a challenge as well. And again, we look at a simple thing like space. It's a huge one. And again, we're all learning about calves, so how we rear them in the first couple of days, be individual pens, group penning. And I've again moved away from the individual pens to group housing calves, and then moving them into bigger groups. So very simple stuff, but after years of research, I think it's the key. More space and more straw. It's terrible after 20 odd years of veterinary and doing extra studies that you're coming back with your main conclusion to a lot of farms is this, that okay, we get drainage right, but more straw. But I'm continuously advocating for more space. And I came up with this morning when I was doing up the presentation, the more principles of calf rearing. I'm essentially looking for more of all these things, more colostrum, more milk, more space, more straw, more air, and more hygiene. Now, when we have more air, we can potentially have more cold, but when we have more milk, I think they offset each other. But a really simple, after years of looking at calves, a conclusion that one of the biggest drivers is space. And then when you look at that as a driver, it's about how we move farmers and farm teams forward to see that space is a worthy investment for their calves. And again, it's about understanding the farm, the daily habits that we look at, and kind of saying, where can we improve it? And I love going on the calf journey from the dry cow pens all the way through to weaning and looking at all the details of the systems with my checklist. And then it's about habits, and I hope that makes sense. Again, you can't be looking at calves. So as a summary, and apologies now if people felt that was very basic and fundamental to start the webinar, but probably spent 20 minutes on the webinar, but I think it's really important to me as a vet. I'm very passionate about veterinary, animal health and farming. And I love sharing my ideas, and I like being told that I'm wrong as well, and having those discussions. But the checklist allows a systematic approach to calf investigations. I think for me as well, knowing my own limitations and those of the farm. And what I mean by that is at a particular stage in my career, I wanted to change the world and every farmer that I work with. But I had to understand again that you can't do that, that there are certain limitations within each farm that you can bring a place to. And you know, that can be around mindsets and stuff. And again, focusing on where the big risks are. Sometimes they're really simple, and the big focus for me is on the top 6. Again, looking at habits and how we move the thing forward. I think we overestimate what we can do in a year, and we really underestimate with this type of approach what we can achieve in 5, maybe even 10 years. So I'm talking about a bit of evidence-based veterinary and adding some psychology in as well. Okay, back on to Precision Microbes, and why am I so excited about this? And it's a very big claim to say that you're bringing a game-changing products to the marketplace. I think I got involved over 2.5 years ago. I had an interest in the gut microbiome because I like reading kind of human research as well. And I had come across it. I thought I knew a little bit. I didn't know much. I tried probably every supplement known going in the calf health space. And even though a little bit skeptical, I liked what the company was saying to me, and I understood that they were doing something a little bit different, particularly with the liquids and the use of live microorganisms. So I got involved in trial work and running trials on farm. And I actually then, probably before the trials nearly finished, we went to market because we are a licensed manufacturer. We had everything in place, but I think they wanted to convince me to get involved, and they did. But it's been a really exciting, albeit somewhat difficult challenge, because we're a startup, we're a small company, and you're bringing a new concept to the marketplace, and the research and trial work is done by Tommy Heffernan, whereas your independent trial work, which I often get asked about. But I suppose I have learned that I'm reasonably good at talking, but the product itself is a real game changer when people start using it. So for us, it's been actually about getting people to try it, see it working, and give us feedback. So it's been an interesting way of bringing the product to market. There's no doubt, even if you don't engage with Precision Microbes, the marketplace is changing. Everyone bandies the word about sustainability, but we are going to see more incorporation of biological solutions, particularly in agriculture and other spaces. And that's just the nature of the market. We have a couple of factors that are helping drive that. Metagenomics, metabolomics, we're understanding more about actually how biology works at a very cellular level. So we can actually harness more of that with more accuracy and detail. You know, what we've been seeing with the products, they've been very visual products. So appetite, obviously helping with gut health, reducing calf diarrhea with long-term feeding, and significant reductions on long-term feeding, or maybe for vets here in Ireland, that, you know, moving farmers away from this kind of want for an oral antibiotic for a calf diarrhea that's not needed, to put an alternative solution there that's more effective, with a, you know, and obviously it's a natural product. Now, being a natural product has been the real challenge, and I've had a lot of smirks and a lot of people going, Tommy, you've spent a lot of time in the veterinary market trying to be credible, we'll say, and now you're coming with natural products. It's a bit hokey pokey, but we've got a lot of science and also the results. So we're delighted to be working at Wynnstay, and Wynnstay, when we started talking to them first, they were more than happy that, yeah, this is a product that vets are going to be interested in, and being wholesale the products to vet practices. And I know Jess at the end is going to talk about that. So again, it's very exciting when you actually look at the role of the gut microbiome in immunity. So there's a bit of a pitch that biologicals might have a role to play. So let's go back to basics again, and we actually look at beneficial microbes and we think about them. And it's particularly interesting for those of us involved in agriculture. You know, we're either probably directly involved as vets, some of us are from a farming background, but we see farms every day. And when we look at actually how we grow crops and we look at actually soil health, one of the most exciting areas of research is around the soil microbiome. All these bacteria, protozoa, and fungi that make soil a living organism, and that interaction between root and plant, the plant to root and the soil microbiome, really exciting. And if we look at, we know, we're not feeding cows. We know the rumen is a large fermentation vat. The cows also have a hindgut. We look at ourselves. You can't look at any sort of medical research at the moment without the gut microbiome popping in its role in digestive health, brain gut connections. Really, really exciting area. So we live in a world of microbes, and we're now understanding more and more about how microbes interact. My own experience as well, when I thought about microbes, if I go back 10 years, I always thought about bacteria as if they were pathogens. I suppose this project has led to an evolution in my thinking and the way I look at beneficial bacteria and their potential role. Again, just by way of definitions to set the scene, when we think about microorganisms, we think about viruses, protozoa, fungi, and yeast. And when we think about a microbiota, that's a collection of them. So on my skin, I have a skin microbiota, a unique collection of microbes. In my lungs, I have a lung microbiota, and in my gut, I have a gut microbiota. When we talk about a microbiome, then particularly the gut microbiome, it's this idea of a collection, and this is in the trillions of microbes working collectively with a specific function. Now, when you talk to microbiologists in the human side about the gut microbiome, they really now see it like another organ because it's involved in digestion, immunity, competing with harmful pathogens, and it has so many interactions at a gut and beyond level that it's been seen like a functioning organ in itself, and that's that collection of trillions of microbes. So by way of animations, these are my animations to represent the gut microbiome. So again, just to kind of put it in perspective, for me, this was mind-blowing when I started. Because we're a grazing system here in Ireland, I had a big interest on the forages we grew and the challenges I was seeing, particularly from the overuse of monocultures and grazing systems, that I actually knew a little bit about the soil microbiome. But there's a link of microbes right throughout species, right to ourselves. And I think actually a lot of talks about sustainability. This is where sustainability should be going, back to soil, back to actually looking at our animals and ourselves from a health point of view. Okay, I probably always spend too long building the subject up because I just think it's so fascinating. But again, if we look at the farm biome and we think about maybe traditionally, okay, again, I use these purple guys as our pathogens, maybe representing the E. coli and the bacteria we don't want to see. If we think about we're controlling the farm biome, we do it through bedding. If we look at calves, bedding, feeding equipment, air quality, air movements, the calf biome, the lungs and the guts, water and feed. And there's actually an opportunity to actually, and I'm involved in obviously a number of areas of research with this company, but looking at environmental microbes, I think that's going to be really interesting. Looking at microbes in water, there's a real way of kind of understanding about, and it's almost biome farming, that, yeah, absolutely, we need our disinfectants, we need all those things, but there is opportunities to harness nature in this story as well. And so when I look at, and I'm going to talk about this, particularly a bug I've been very interested in because I've worked with pigs and poultry research now as well, is E. coli, looking at some of the research there, some of the human stuff. I think it's a big one in very young calves because of its role, as I'll explain, around leaky gut and the effect it has at a cellular level. And one of the interesting things, I notice actually when I do webinars or talks, I say interesting and fascinating up to 50 or 60 times, but I think it is interesting. Is water. I've always been interested in water, knowing that our ruminant animals need available water. The rumen's a large fermentation vat. We know that a developing rumen needs water. But what I have been looking at over the last period of time is some of the work that I've been doing researching on crypto on farms, and it's a real challenge in our farms, is looking at the coliforms and E. coli levels in water on different farms with calf health challenges. because E. coli acts often as a primer for a lot of the other pathogens we see. And if we think about that digestive system as well, and we think about E. coli rapidly multiplying every 20 minutes, and its ability, now this is a pig study, but E. coli can survive for quite a bit in water. It is an area, I think, over the next 10 years, the poultry and pigs have been doing it for a while, but I think we're going to see increasingly people on the dairy side, and maybe even on the sheep and beef side, looking at water quality and some of the diseases we're seeing. It's one to watch out when we think about the farm biome. Okay, so back onto the gut microbiome. Okay, so some general principles again, I just can't help myself. Some general principles again, but let's get into the gut microbiome. So what is it? No matter what species of animals we look at, we've got these trillions of unique microorganisms working like an organ, involved in 3 core processes: digestive health, regulating immune function, and providing protection against pathogens. So the gut microbiome is absolutely essential. Gut health is essential. Hippocrates once said, the godfather of modern medicine, that all disease begins in the gut. I'm trying to reframe that now with Precision Microbes, and we're saying all health begins in the gut. So when we look at a calf in utero, what's actually happening, we would have thought years ago that they were pretty sterile, but we now know that the calf in utero has some innate microbial life in its gut, but it's primarily, and this is the same for all mammalian species, through vaginal delivery, it picks up the microbes from the vagina of the mother, and obviously the fecal microbes, and then the environmental microbes. And if you look at the gut like a recently field ready to be seeded out, these go into the gut and proliferate. Now, if we think about what those microbes are from a mother's perspective and a dam perspective, and the environmental microbes that are there, well, that's going to have a very big influence on the calf. Again, I'm doing some really nice work on looking at microbiomes in sows and cows as well, to see what are the challenges there, what are the calves picking up. But essentially they're seeding their gut with the vaginal fecal microbiota and then the environmental microbiota. And that microbiota, when you look at this research, will change over time. Bacterial species will change, but it's a really important phase. Again, if you look at the human side, there's a lot of interest in this, because babies born by C-section will pick up a lot of the environmental microbes in the surgery, and they have directly linked that with a lot of autoimmune and allergic conditions. So I'm not suggesting that's a challenge in farm, but it's really interesting when we look at how a calf develops its microbiome. Again, each farm can have their own microbiome fingerprint. One of the disease issues that I've seen for both here in Ireland and on my travels is unfortunately enterotoxic E. coli in young calves from 3 to 5 days of age. And particularly in our larger farms, both indoor all year round and seasonal systems. So I suppose it's interesting, and we've more work to do here. Again, when we think about the gut microbiome and we think about digestive health, we're only learning about the microbes and how important they are. Again, looking at digestion, absorption, secretion, there's so many activities, but we know that the microbes in the calf's digestive tract are involved in protein synthesis, regulation of digestive health, so really key. They also, if we look at the digestive tract, we often say as humans, we are what we eat, but we're not really, we are what we absorb. So we actually, when we look at the gut, it's like a sponge. So if we have optimal health in the digestive tract, well, then we're going to have optimum digestion as well. So I'll talk a bit about that as well when I go into the microbiome. Again, this is something that's very, very regularly bandied about, and it's that 70% of the immune system of a lot of our animals is immune-based, or is gut-based. And this is true. And actually, if you actually look at some of the research in calves, it might be a little bit higher, but it's the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. So these are all our white blood cells. They're a component of the mucus-associated lymphoid tissue. These are all our white blood cells, our lymph tissue, our Peyer's patches, our crypts, our diffuse and intensive sort of areas of immunological cells in the gut. And it makes up 70% of the immune system. And this is really important when we think about gut health. It may be, okay, from a diarrhea perspective, we all know the risk around pneumonia goes 8-fold up when calves have had diarrhea. But probably when we see some of the work that I've seen, and practically as well, as I call observational evidence, when calves their digestive tract is balanced and stabilized long term, they certainly seem to be able to fight infections more. And again, it would make sense when we look at the immune system being so heavily gut based. Okay, so if we look at just at a cellular level again, just on the right hand side, as I look at it, I'm not sure the way you're looking at it, is the so this is a eubiotic gut. So we have nice cell apposition. One thing we need to remember in the gut as well is we've all this bacterial and microorganisms in the microbiome, but there's only one layer of cells between the lumen and the digesta. It's protected by a lovely layer of mucin, which protects the gut produced by these goblet cells. We've all our immune cells here in different areas. They can be quite focused like our Pear's patches. But when we get disruption to the microbiome, we get a reduction in this mucus layer protecting it. We get a direct effect on immune regulation, particularly in the lumen level, which has a link to the systemic system as well. So we want to avoid dysbiosis if we can at all. Okay, so why is there so much immunity in the gut? Well, if we think about it from a practical level, the gut is exposed to digesta coming in. And if we think about it, it's kind of hard to find a similar figure in animals. But if we think about an average adult human, if we roll out the surface area of our digestive tract, it's the same size as a tennis court. So that's a huge surface area. So the microbes are actually playing a very protective role, and they're actually involved in signaling. So they're not only involved in direct competition with bad bacteria, but they act as a signaling system, because even with all the immune cells and all the lymphocytes that are in our digestive tracts, they still can't guard and protect that big surface area. So we've got digestion, immunity, and the other big role that beneficial microbes and gut microbes play is around competition. So none of us would be here without some innate defenses. So bacteria actually compete with each other. They compete by a number of mechanisms. There's a thing called quorum sensing. They're space occupying, and they can directly compete. So if you look at the digestive system again, and we look at the nice integrity here, and then we look at mild, maybe acute disruption or chronic inflammation, we see that we get a shift in bacterial populations. This is a really interesting subject, maybe in our pets, our horses, and ourselves, when you look at chronic inflammatory bowel or leaky gut. But it is about understanding that bacteria, if I have a healthy population of bacteria in a calf's gut, well, they're going to provide protection. When I get disruption, be it through stress or disease, we get that disruption. And it's really interesting when we look at how the green are the good guys and the purple are the bad guys, how they compete with each other. They do this by the production of postbiotic metabolites like intericins and bactericins. So bacteria are always producing nitrous oxide and other competitive agents or metabolites. So that's a little bit piece on, I suppose, the gut microbiome and the three key areas of it. So when we look at probiotics, then it's kind of a simple principle, or was thought to be a simple principle, that, okay, we've all these beneficial bacteria in our digestive tract, be it humans or animals. What do we need to do? Well, we need to just pop more of them in there, okay? In really simple terms, that's what a lot of it was based upon, to actually mimic what they're doing. So improving digestive function, regulating immunity, and competing with pathogens. I think as metagenomics has gone on, we can look at the different species, we can look at bacillus species, licheniformis, all those different types of species. But essentially, that's what we're trying to do with probiotics. The challenge that I would have had with probiotics post or pre this project was inconsistent results. And this is a very large survey done on poultry producers. And it was the largest survey I could find on probiotics. And it was inconsistent results was probably the main feedback. And you see that a lot. So I'll explain a little bit why we could be seeing inconsistent results, but just a little bit more on the history of probiotics. Because again, it gives us some context on it. Well, Hippocrates said that all disease begins in the gut. You know, if we look back to Greek and Roman times, it's interesting, a lot of us will work on dairy farms, that they were carrying milk in leather satchels. That milk fermented and went off, but they found that that fermented milk had a health benefit. And if we move forward to the early 1900s, to Eli Metchnikoff, who's up on the left-hand side here with the, well, he also has a beard, Hippocrates, this guy here, fresh from a Nobel Prize in his back pocket, he went off to study aging and aging populations. And he went to a part of Bulgaria to see why people were living into their hundreds. And the commonality that he found was that they were all drinking fermented milk. And he discovered the first sort of commercial bacteria or probiotic, Lactobacillus bulgaris. Probably an interesting area to think about when we think of the future of milk as well, because we constantly, as people involved in the industry, see all the outside pressures that are coming on, maybe dairy farming, livestock production. But I think milk has a real role to play if we look at yogurts and fermented products in the health story. So Eli Metchnikoff got this story going. I think it's become a very familiar story now in the human and animal side. But I think when we actually look at how we use beneficial microorganisms and probiotics, there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think that's why we're a game-changing company. We're doing something very different. And I think we may, and this is a huge statement, I think we may change how probiotics are used in the future. Okay, so why are we different? Well, just some of the nomenclature about and understanding around, we think about direct-fed microbials. Okay, when we think about prebiotics essentially are the feed for good bacteria. So in humans, that's fiber. In our cows, that's fiber as well. Bacteria ferment that. We look at mannoligosaccharides, fructooligosaccharides. Colostrum contains some prebiotics, but they're essentially the feed for good bacteria. So we have traditionally used prebiotics, be it in milk replacers, they can be in calf supplements. Then probiotics, again, is nothing new. Probiotics, though, we've got to understand these bacteria. They're actually like factories. Okay, when you look at the bacteria, they're like factories. It's actually what they produce, the postbiotics, they're metabolites that they produce through fermentation that carry out most of the functionality at a cellular level. And there's a vast array of postbiotics. So the bacteria themselves, the probiotics, actually produce and ferment and metabolize these metabolites that are postbiotics. And we are the first to market with a liquid pro and postbiotic. So we've got the good beneficial microorganisms and their metabolites in the liquid. So again, I'll go back to my animation and understand you're going to hear lots more about postbiotics over the next decade, because they're quite a new area of research. They're looking at them in the mammary gland, they're looking at them in the lungs, and this is actually where they're actually looking at the specific postbiotics and taking them and using them. But where we have a blend of microorganisms that are producing an array of postbiotics. At gut level, again, if we go back to a cellular level, and again, I'm conscious of time, about another 15 minutes on this, but I think it's really important. It's a really big subject, and I try and bring it all together by explaining, maybe at basic levels and then go out to a top level again. But it's really important when we understand right down at a cellular level what's happening, because we know that these microorganisms, the gut microbiota, is involved in digestion, immunity, and protection. And we know that prebiotics is something we'll talk about because they can help these beneficial bacteria in the gut. But when we look actually at how most of the bacterial interactions occur, it's by the production of metabolites. And at a cellular level, that's really important. And I talk about a postbiotic metabolite that people will know about, like butyrate. It's involved in trans-electrical resistance. It stimulates the production of mucus from goblet cells. So the postbiotics are a really exciting area of research. Again, when we look at the microbiome in calves, humans, different species, there's a lot, or different animals, there's a lot of conversations about the potential microorganisms we could be using. And even on a human level, they're doing stool samples and they're actually saying, well, you're missing this species of Akkermansia. This is what you need to supplement with. Now, there's thousands of species, but when you actually look at the functionality and you look at what postbiotics are produced, it's actually it's a narrow range, meaning that the postbiotic metabolites are a really interesting area if we can get them in there, because from a functional point of view, they're equally, if not more important than the actual species we're using. And if we think again about this digestive tract, if we think about the normal eubiotic gut, or if we think about a disrupted gut, maybe chronic inflammation or acute inflammation, it's the postbiotic metabolites that actually either maintain that health or help with recovery. And I really am guilty of oversimplifying things at times. And this is one of my oversimplifications, but it is that comparison of a sponge. So we aren't what we eat, we are what we absorb. So if we've got an inflamed and poor gut flora, well, we're going to have poor digestion and poor performance. And that's going to be the same with our calves. Where we've an optimally performing digestive tract, you optimize digestion and absorption. So what we're doing at Precision Microbes is quite exciting, because we're going now back to a bacterial individual's level to kind of understand how bacteria work. and beneficial microbes work. Because when we understand that when I say the postbiotics are really important, well, then I have to explain how we do what we do. And when we look at bacteria, we have to culture them and grow them. And they go through different phases. Be pathogens or beneficial bacteria. They go through a lag phase, a log phase, a stationary phase, and death phase. And it's around this phase that they actually start producing their metabolites or postbiotics. So what we do is we take a number of unique herbs and we ferment and culture, propagate these bacteria till they're in their log phase. And then we have a pro and postbiotic liquid. So to do this, has taken a couple of researchers have been involved in this for many years. So to be able to do this propagation process has taken a lot of time to actually be able to culture the live bacteria, but then stabilize them in a low acidic medium where the bacteria are still live, but they're actually in a dormant phase. And why this is exciting is because if we traditionally look at what we've done with probiotic bacteria, is we've done the opposite. And commercially, this makes a lot of sense because we've taken bacteria and we freeze dried them. And this is what they look like under an electron microscope. This means I can put them into a paste, a powder, and that's where we traditionally have always used probiotics. But the difference between having live bacteria with their postbiotics versus a freeze-dried product is hugely different, because when we actually go and we think about the digestive tract and we think about, well, we need speed of action, maybe if we're looking at recovery, or we want actually the product efficacy, well then, and the postbiotics are key, it makes a huge amount of sense. Now, if we use freeze-dried products, well then they've got a lag phase, they've got to survive stomach acid, and then if we've got diarrhea, we've got increased transit time. And no matter what way you look at any of the beneficial microorganisms, there is a lag phase to get to the log phase if they survive. So this is why we're seeing a difference with our product. And this is why, I suppose, for me, it's been a very unique project, that the best way of selling the product is getting people to try it. And that's what I did with vets in Ireland. Is I said, look, try the product, see how you get on. There was a lot of skepticism because it was seen as alternative, but the product itself has certainly been our best asset, if you like. And again, we're you know, when you talk about herbs, you're in the alternative space, but there's very unique herbs been used to culture and ferment and grow these bacteria as well. So there's an added benefit from a gut health perspective. I'm obviously not going to talk about equine product, but our equine blend has been a massive success. And again, if we look at the acid adapted nature of the bacteria in the liquid, this is why we're getting to the hindgut of the horse. This is why we're seeing a speed of action. Now, again, if I look at the calf side of things and I look at the digestive system and efficacy, and I think about, well, if a calf's got diarrhea and we want recovery, and we want to maybe look at the use of the products at higher levels for recovery, and I think about, well, if it's got diarrhea, it's got increased transit time. And I look at maybe using freeze-dried probiotics versus having them live with their postbiotic metabolites, it makes complete sense that one of the things that I saw on the trials, and we've continuously see from the market, that a lot of people will start with the products maybe in groups of calves that have diarrhea and look and watching the speed of recovery being faster than what they normally would see. And I'll explain what is actually happening at a cellular level there as well. Again, if we look at antibiotics, they have a big role to play in the gut. I won't dwell too much on this. One of the beauties about our products is that if any animal species is on antibiotics, they can go on our products because the postbiotic metabolites aren't affected by antibiotics, so they work well together. So the postbiotics are a key part of the story. We're a liquid pro and postbiotic solution. The postbiotics are really key when you look at where the rubber meets the road at cellular level. Again, one of the questions I had got initially was this idea of alternative medicines. And again, if we look at metabolomics, our understanding now of how beneficial microbes work, we know much more about the mechanisms. If we think about penicillin on the left-hand side, that was actually a metabolite of a fungus. If we look on the right-hand side, it's Satoshi Omuro, a Japanese scientist who discovered a Streptomyces bacteria that produced a metabolite later refined by Winston Campbell that became known as ivermectin. We're moving away from alternative medicines with biological approaches because we now understand the functionality and what's actually happening right down to a cellular level. Okay, quickly on the calf products from a practical point of view, they're available in 1 and 10 litre. We've launched a 20 litre recently because I suppose we've seen an explosion in our home market here in Ireland over the last 2 years since we've launched, and it's been driven by higher volumes and demand. But I know Wynnstay have both the 1 litre and 10 litre in stock. We're moving to a bag and box. Those of you who ever spent time in Australia will be familiar with wine from a bag and box. We've done this because we're using live microorganisms, and we're extending shelf life from 12 months in a can to now 18 months in a sealed bag and box. And we're seeing that demand growing for volume. We also have a lot of automatic feeders, and because automated feeders usually mean a transition from whole milk to milk replacer, there's a lot of stress and upset in the gut. We're seeing more and more farmers feeding every day, every calf or product every day through automated feeders. So there's a little connector. This is the little tap, and there's a little connector for linking in automated feeders. Obviously, bag and box isn't a very robust as it can, but we're reducing plastic as well, and we're continuously, I suppose, looking at that bag and box, how we can make it stronger. But it's all about that we're dealing with live microorganisms in the product. Again, if we look at the calf digestive system, there's 2 main applications. In simple terms, if we look at the digestive tract, the products were designed to be given every day to help stabilize the gut during periods of stress and transition. But to make a name for ourselves, we had found, and I had seen in the trial work, that particularly with vets, that they were looking for something other than antibiotics that they didn't have to help stabilize these calves with diarrhea. Bearing in mind, we have a very seasonal system here with lots of calves and lots of calf diarrhea, and that's at higher doses. The stabilization was working really well. If we think about something like rotavirus and we think about how the gut actually recovers, it's good to understand very quickly as well when we think about postbiotics, what's actually happening and why we would need postbiotics going in there in the liquid from a recovery point of view versus a freeze-dried bacteria. Because if we think of some postbiotic like butyrate, it's involved in, at a very cellular level, it's involved in the production of interleukin-22, which actually helps repair damaged cells, but it also is involved in the production of interleukin-18, which speeds up apoptosis and prevents viral replication. So there's a lot of science to actually the postbiotic and the mechanisms around stabilization of the gut. So practically on farm. So I did the trial work. You're looking at the trial work and research here on the computer in front of you. What I saw was improved average daily gain, reduction of scour, particularly on long-term use, big reductions on interventions with sick calves and antibiotics. But what was most interesting for me was both with the trial work with farms and veterinary practices was that everybody wanted to buy the product, which I think, look, I have from the very beginning, I could not ignore that when people used the product, that they were happy with it. And it was probably our best sales tool. So off I went into the marketplace with, getting people to try it, and then, trying it maybe on calves that were recovering from diarrhea, and then going to the huge potential of long-term feeding. Best application for the product really is that 30 mils from birth daily per calf. So it's quite a high volume product. And you can, again, in dairy to beef systems where you have a calf transitioning from a dairy farm, maybe to new diet, new environment, it's working really well in calf rearing, and I did a lot of research in that space as well. So the 30 mils long-term daily feeding is really where it's at. We launched in February 2021. We've now opened 7 markets in Europe and the UK, and we've got product going to start, will be in Australia next month. So we've seen huge growth that brings all the challenges with it, but it's been really interesting. Again, that's the bag and box. Here's some of the feedback. Go to our website, and I suppose what we've been good at, even though we're not long in the game, is actually we realize that our customers, be it vets, calf specialists, the team, people working with the products, are, once people believe in it, they're our best salespeople. So you can go and listen to what some vet practitioners in Ireland were saying about the product. Again, if we think about calf diarrhea, really, I suppose everyone's looking for a prevention or something to prevent it. Certainly with digestive and nutritional upsets, we're a game changer. Depending on the pathogen, then it's all about, I suppose, fitting it. But when we understand that immunity and infection pressure piece, we must look at beneficial bacteria and postbiotics. They're very much in the immunity side of the calf diarrhea piece. Okay, again, I covered that. So just quickly, when we think about the role for something that's going to help with stress, and probably the impact of stress in the gut. Stress has a massive impact. There's loads of stressors. In Ireland, our weather seems to be the main stressor. We had a very healthy spring in our seasonal calving system up to middle of March. The weather changed and all hell broke loose. Farms feeding long-term precision microbes, I mean, the scour incidence was massively reduced. Again, we've dehorning, we've castration, we've transport. These things cause stress, and stress impacts gut health. So you can see there's a huge potential there. And again, it's not just stress from an acute diarrhea. We must understand low-grade stress over a period of time will impact, at a cellular level, and cause leaky gut, low-grade inflammation. Very commonly talked about maybe on the equine side, the human side, and the pet world, but it can be a factor in calves as well. So practical applications on farm, I'll quickly go through these. So if we look at calf diarrhea, a very acutely sick calf, a lot of, and this can be beef or dairy, you can actually go to quite a high level. So 60 mils orally twice daily for 3 days. It's a licensed gut stabilizer. The speed of action is because it's got the postbiotics in it. The particular microbe, Enterococcus fecum NCIMB 10415, is licensed for gut stabilization. So at higher doses for your acutely sick calf, that's where some farmers and vets will start with. But what we've seen is, I suppose, the real foothold we got in the marketplace on our first season was groups of calves. So the calves are still drinking, they may have or recovering from diarrhea or another setback. You don't quite need to go to that 60 mils twice a day. You can go 60 mils orally or in milk. So it mixes really well through milk. And calves love the fermented taste of the product. So it actually helps with appetite. So this 60 mils orally for 5 to 7 days has been a real game changer in the calf health space. Obviously, the earlier the intervention, the better. And this is where you get into the bigger volumes. When we look at nutritional bacterial diarrheas, we've been have had huge success. I think I would equally say with rotavirus, it's been a very, very effective product, helping calves recover with stabilization. And what I have often done with both vets and farmers in the early days is if, you had a group of calves or 2 groups of calves, put one on them and one off them and compare the speed of action. Again, with Cryptosporidium, because it's an intracellular parasite, what the vets here have been doing is using paramycetin as a treatment and for recovering calves, and the 2 together have been working well. So the 60 mils and paramycetin for a couple of days, because the postbiotics aren't affected by the antibiotic, they can be fed together. So that's where we started. I think thankfully now we're actually back to where the product was designed, which is long-term usage to help with stabilization, to promote better gut health. And this is for 30 mils for as long as the probiotics need to be fed. We came up with a marketing message, and I won't lie, it was a marketing message. There was a lot of confusion because of the different dose rates. So we came up with a marketing message of 30 mils for 30 days. And that worked extremely well to move farmers onto long-term usage. But what we found is that when they did that, a lot of them kept feeding it simply because they saw a difference when the calves came off the product. So I think we're moving now to that 30 mils a day right up to weaning. So I did the trial work, like I said. I was involved in 7 farm trials in 2021, varying numbers of calves, treatment and controls. We looked at calf scour recovery trials as well. I actually had a big challenge with them because I suppose time was one factor, and I had to maybe look at it outside of the work, and I was relying on farmers. And I also got some vet friends of mine to do some calf scour recovery trials. But one of the challenges was that when the calves that were given it in the treatment group recovered, that the other calves ended up getting it. And I was involved with an ag college there in Ireland, a big ag college, and they wanted to trial the products again. I was delighted to hear that, to get more data. But after 2 weeks, the trial ended because there was 100 heifers in the shed, and they had started 50 on it, and they had gone on so well that they didn't want to not give it to the other 50. So it's been interesting when we look at recovery trials. One of the interesting things I would have seen with the trial work is that I had some incredible data on average daily gains, but it varied massively from almost negligible up to 120 grams a day between treatment and control. And that was based on probably the different biomes of the farm, the different challenges that were there, the different milk feeding levels, but it was always positive. I think on the antibiotic side as well, it varied farm to farm. But what I saw consistently on long-term feeding was a reduction of calf scour and certainly the severity. So if they got calf diarrhea, the severity was less. And again, it varied farm to farm. But every single trial produced farmer feedback around appetite and calf vigor, and they could actually see a difference. I think from the vet perspective, when we launched into the vet market and got vets using it, they really liked the antibiotic reduction piece, be it as an alternative to antibiotics in recovery, and also with long-term feeding, less incidences. So we've 300 vet practices now in Ireland stock and use the various PM products. Major feedback has been around the antibiotics piece as well. So practically on a dairy farm, I'm on my last 2 slides now, and I've of course gone over time as usual. Practically on farm, it's been the appetite, it's been the calf thrive and performance, it's been that reduction in calf diarrhea and long-term feeding. A lot of farms will start maybe with that 60 mils for 5 to 7 days in milk. Again, getting in early is really important. It's been a visual difference product, which has been an interesting way and very uncomfortable for me. And I've got a lot of criticism from my colleagues, good friends. And I'm talking about people who I went to college with and drank beer with, around, early days that, it's my research, it's my trial work, where's your evidence? But, it's been the product and the science. And if people get it and see it and use it, that's the way we've driven it into the marketplace. And it's, we are involved in research with UC Davis early days as well. There is other research projects going on at the moment. So we are constantly gleaming data. But I think the 30 mils from birth to weaning is where I see this product being, and that's from dairy to beef otherwise, or as well. Again, looking at the 30 mils a day, one of the things that you can do is you can actually top up calves if they do get issues with diarrhea. I could do a lecture on cryptosporidium. I've done so much work on it. What we found with cryptosporidium is the precision microbes, along with Halicure in a preventative regime, is working very, very well. And with actually twice the normal level for the first 7 days while feeding halofuginone, because halofuginone is very effective in the prevention and control, but it's very hard on the gut. So we've combined 30 mils twice a day with halofuginone and then back to 30 mils, and we'll have good success with that as well. Okay, I think I've talked for long enough. Hopefully I have kept people some way interested. Again, I felt that, it's really important that I share my lessons on calf health. I'm very passionate about that. I think Precision Microbes is a tool. I would encourage people to try it. Certainly people will try it, and I know I've spoken to Jess there over the last couple of weeks. That's where a lot of your farms were maybe starting with, Jess, is in the recovery period, but more and more people will use the long-term feeding. Again, thanks for your support and time today. You can reach out to me on info@TommyTheVet if you have more questions, even if it's to give out or give feedback. And again, thanks to Jess and all the team at Wynnstay for organising this webinar today. It's greatly appreciated. And Jess, I've gone about 10 minutes over time, which would not be unusual for me.
No one's surprised.
Okay.
We just had a couple of questions come in, so just fire 1 or 2 of them just quickly. The first one was, could the product be used in lambs to reduce the risk of watery mouth?
Yeah, really interesting question. I have 2 years ago, when we obviously started seeing results with calves, I immediately thought of lambs, and we did 2 flocks, very large flock trials, 2,000 ewes, and I was very unhappy with the results. We had treatment control and incospectin. We ran 2 flocks for a season and it didn't work. And why it didn't work in watery mouth and lambs was because E. coli multiplies incredibly rapidly every 20 minutes. And the type of microbes, particularly Faecium and the other microbes we have in there, they're more competitive than killing, okay? So what we actually did was we developed a specific lamb product, which we launched this year, and we did trial work on that last year. It's an advanced gut stabilizer where we reformulated it, completely targeted at the lamb gut and targeted at the microbes that were required to compete much quicker with E. coli. And we launched that this spring in the Irish veterinary market here, and it's been a pretty big success in the sense that we've seen the reduction of antibiotics. But no, the calf product would not be used to prevent watery mouth. It's not licensed as well for lambs, but what I have seen, of course, is when it comes to pet lambs and you don't have anything else available, it acts just effectively as it would calves. So with your pet lambs that have diarrhea, when you're past that 24-hour risk period for E. coli, it really helps with pet lambs. And we have a lot of farmers using it off-label and vets off-label for pet lambs.
Lovely, thank you. As we've gone over, Tommy, we'll wrap it up there. But if anyone does have any more questions, like I said, you've got Tommy's email, you've got access to us. Just like to say thank you again for coming along. Just one last bit is we will be sending up a follow-up email that will include a copy of the recording. It'll also have the Precision Microbes brochure that's got all of the contact details on for your local calf specialist. Should you like to, look into it further, we can of course come and have a chat to you. There's currently a 2-for-1 offer in Wynnstay stores as well. So again, contact your local calf specialist if you'd like to try some. And yeah, it was just really say thank you all very much for joining, and thank you, Tommy. It's been great,
Jess.
and hopefully everyone's learned a lot as normal. So thank you very much.
See you later. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us on this Wednesday. It's Wednesday, isn't it? Okay, right. See you later, Jess. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.